I would like to introduce our speaker. I'm so excited to have Bobby here. It's his first time with us, but I have watched so many of his presentations. He's always very dynamic and knowledgeable, and I hope that you will get as much out of it from his presentation today as I have had in his previous presentation. He is from the HDL, so everybody knows about their firm. They are very well known in the area. So with that, I'm going to let Bobby introduce himself, actually.
Great. Yes. Thank you so much, Catherine. Really appreciate that. Let's see. So for many of those, welcome everyone. So glad you could join us today. And hopefully it's a little bit different training program than what you've had GASB related or kind of more of the tech talk on the finance side. We're going to be talking a little bit more about the economy and some of the trends that we see for your local agencies or just bigger picture. I know there's a lot of registrants here from special districts, water districts, sanitary districts, and even park districts. Hopefully you'll be able to glean some of the information and be able to relate it back to your agency specifically. So it's just hopefully a little bit different, change it up, relax a little bit for the next hour, and we'll go through these. As you see on the screen, Bobby Young, Client Services Director here for HDL Sales Tax, and been in and around local government for 20 plus years. First started on the auditing side, much like Mays and Associates and everybody there. Then shifted over to local government, spent about 13 years down here in Orange County, in and around different levels of the organization as well. And now most recently, the last 8 years, been with HDL, really focused heavily on sales tax, but keep our eyes on all of the trends and everything going on. Here we are in July. Before we get started on the presentation, and maybe I'm a little bit biased, but for those of you who just wrapped up your fiscal year 21-22 budget cycle and have an approved council adopted budget in hand, congratulations. It's most certainly should be celebrated. It takes a lot of hard work and it's a heavy task, a big lift to get through the entire process. So I myself, as a former budget officer, probably, again, a little bit biased on that side. And then also for those of you who are looking right around the corner and you kind of wear both hats, you're going to be closing your year-end books coming up. Hopefully you get a little bit of a breather during this month to get ready for that next treadmill cycle, ready to go. So I have a lot of sympathy, again, having been on that side of it for everybody. Hopefully you can keep your engines going and crank through it. For those of you who may not be as familiar with HDL, we do, as Catherine said, we're blessed to have a lot of clients here in California, and we do our best to keep everybody as happy as possible and pick up new clients when the opportunity strikes. But many of our clients are cities, counties, and special districts, especially on the special district side, focused a lot on transportation agencies and the additional tax measures that go to those transportation agencies. We help with them. We are also blessed to have a 99% client retention rate, which we are very proud of, and we try to maintain as much as possible, especially keeping clients happy. Our total services that we have both here at HDL, sales tax, but then also HDL property tax, HDL Core and Cone on the property tax side. We've also got services available for economic development, cannabis management, tax and fee administration, which underneath that includes business license, TOT, short-term rentals, also utility users, tax and franchise fees. We've really tried to hone in and focus on all revenue sources where we might be able to help your local agencies gain some efficiencies, be able to use our knowledge and our experience to help your communities really generate as much revenue as possible. So a little bit about HDL. Feel free to reach out if you're interested in any service that you see on the screen that maybe kind of piques a little bit of interest, maybe on the horizon for your agency. So here we go. Let's go ahead and jump right in, where we're going to be talking about the economic trends. But first, let's run the first poll question that we have for you and just gauge for your local agency, which revenue stream is kind of your top generator. I'm waiting. Did the polling pop in? There we go. So how would you rate your for your agency, which revenue source generates the most amount of revenue? Sales tax, property tax, or TOT? Or for those of you that work for special districts, go ahead and click on the I do not work for a city. We'll kind of focus a lot as to kind of what's affecting revenues for all agencies. So while that's going, let's go ahead and go through. So what we're going to be talking about today are how different local government revenue sources have been impacted by the pandemic, leading up to and then post-pandemic these last few quarters. What's the short-term outlook for these revenue sources? As you can imagine, the long-term outlook is still varied at this point. A lot of uncertainty and variables that are mixed in there, but we'll kind of focus on the short-term outlook, and then how efficiently you can stay in the know about your agency's revenue streams. So here you see the polling results. Looks like they've got a heavier, little bit more weight on property tax, which is good. Sales tax number 2, TOT number 3. Perfect. Thanks for that. I think we'll be able to touch on all those topics today. That's the hope. So let's rewind really quickly back to March of 2020, almost maybe a year and 3 months ago. When the pandemic first set in, we had the shelter in place directive that came into effect right in the middle of March, really started to change our whole world. Some key points on each one of those revenue streams and what we were thinking. Sales tax impacts were otherwise unknown. We had really never shut down the economy like this before. So a lot of our forecasts and thoughts at the time were most certainly very pessimistic and a lot of uncertainty there. As far as property tax goes, even though the roll was already set for the calendar year 2019, there's reaching back into the Great Recession. There was still a lot of uncertainty about how would mortgages transpire through the pandemic. What would home values do? Tremendous amount of just kind of uncertainty, and we've never experienced anything like this before. Tourism, very non-existent, no business travel allowed. So TOT revenues, what were those going to look like? And then also the last one, as far as business licenses go, if businesses couldn't operate, would they close and thereby completely impact business license revenue? So thank goodness, and it doesn't go too far from us to remind ourselves that the federal government did step in almost immediately. There you can see these are just 4 major stimulus packages that Congress have passed to help really support, and as we'll see in certain sectors of the economy, really helped then lift revenues back, especially back to local agencies. But overall, the economy has maintained and sustained through the pandemic. Then most recently, March 2021, with ARPA passing, and everybody, a lot of local agencies now looking to spend that money and maximize its benefits. But here, more tangibly, what has been the trickle-down effect? Again, we don't want to lose the sight of the fact of how much money has been put into consumers' pockets, homeowners' pockets, been able to stay there in the household and be able to be spent on other things and really maintain. Whether it was the $600 weekly unemployment benefits, later extended but reduced to $400 in excess of base minimums, $1,200, $500 per child cash payments, mortgage forbearance, which was I think a really big one. Maybe didn't get as much press as some of the other aspects, but I think is really big as far as property taxes and property values being sustained. Then most recently, the very bottom there, you'll see $1,400 per person payments through ARPA. They're obviously that's being distributed now, which is likely going to have a tail end effect on our economy, especially the spending economy on sales tax. But just more money being pushed into the economy to help us. So I've really enjoyed reviewing this and keeping it in a mindset of what's been going on more tangibly with different households, different communities throughout the entire state. Really quickly, I'm going to jump into sales tax, starting there big first, got a few more slides because of how dynamic sales tax can be given economic conditions, but then also this pandemic. I think some of these slides really do tell a story. First, starting over here on the right, you can see the depths statewide, and we're really looking at the 1% Bradley Burns portion of sales tax here, that which comes to you locally, the depths of 2Q20, and really third quarter caught us a bit by surprise. Many of you as clients will have heard that we weren't expecting it to be this high in 3Q. 4Q jumped up again and got started to get a little closer to fourth quarter 2019, which is the last pre-pandemic period. Then this normal trend from 4Q down to 1Q, not a surprise for us. It normally happens with seasonal activity, but it is still higher than where we were even first quarter 2019, again, pre-pandemic. So a lot of support here within the economy for sales tax, and it's allowed us all, I think, to take a nice big deep breath that things aren't as bad as what we thought they could be. And then when we see some of the categories and where the money's been trickling in from, the solid green line here, state and county pools, really think internet sales. When you're looking at this line, a lot of major online retailers do allocate their local tax into the countywide use tax pools for each county throughout the state. And with the closure, especially of brick and mortar stores, right here at the depths of 2Q20, that consumers just immediately switched over to online spending and really drove this line up. The return of brick and mortar, this is what gives us some more hope and optimism of what's to come. We've seen malls start to reopen. A lot of your local jurisdictions that are dependent on brick and mortar and consumers going into stores to shop. The fourth quarter results, and now even this first quarter results really getting in there, leaving us some hope and optimism of what's to come here for the remainder of calendar year 2021. And so that it's a nice trend. We're taking a bit of a breath of fresh air with that. The other thing that I want to make sure I touch on this, I think I've got it also in a later slide, this gain in the pools also was enhanced by the adoption and implementation of AB 147, or regulations on out-of-state online retailers, that I'll focus on a little bit more. So that's definitely boosted there. For those of you with auto dealerships, this will be kind of one of the last points I talk on here. You can see this orangish line right here, very well sustained. This has been probably one of the most fascinating aspects of sales tax, where we've seen auto dealerships and overall auto sales really much, much higher than they were in the pre-pandemic periods. People have felt comfortable buying new cars, especially when things started to reopen after the initial shelter-in-place directive. The lack of public transportation, or the comfortability with public transportation, folks shifting over to cars, and we've seen this go up. Probably something to keep in mind with regards to transportation agencies, whether your ridership is down, likely has been during the pandemic. Is that going to continue with more auto sales throughout the entire state? Or are we going to have bigger impacts on our roads because, again, more cars, and there'll be more traffic once everybody is back commuting again? Just something to keep in mind there for your transportation agencies. For the coming summer period, there's two categories here: restaurants and hotels taking a big dip on this lavender line. Oops, I apologize. And also fuel and service stations with the lack of commuters. Once we hit the 2Q period, and that would be second quarter calendar year, April, May, June, we will anticipate that restaurants and fuel and service stations will start to go up. Just a little bit of a delayed response there. Where have we seen the results? This is also a very telling and interesting way to see the data. We are lucky enough to have a lot of data statewide, almost 98% throughout the entire state, where we break apart into different regions, whether it be Sacramento, more inland, San Joaquin Valley, right there on the Central Coast, Bay Area, and Southern California are just kind of the few that I've shown here. And you can see second quarter 2020, that's the April, May, June period a year ago, really had an entire quarter with shelter in place. Overall, statewide down 16%. Bay Area hit very hard. Again, lack of tourism, lack of business travel really impacts there. Then once we hit 3Q, you can see Sacramento and San Joaquin ended up with positive gains. Again, keeping in mind here, things like spending those tax dollars locally. I think it's very tangible here, not commuting over into the Bay Area, which you can see still took a 6% drop. So keeping some of that money more local, but then also internet sales and how dollars get allocated for internet sales, staying there within Sacramento and San Joaquin valleys. Then overall, the state really only down 1%. You can glance over here at 4Q, also only down 1%. This is what then now leaves us with a lot of hope and optimism that we have been supported through this period on the sales tax side, most certainly. And then in 1Q, the period that we just got data for, and we're talking about with all of our clients, you can see in some cases double-digit gains. Again, we've got a bit of a dynamic where we've had a major retailer shift their allocations, and we're seeing that here. I've got a slide later to show that. Southern California, very diverse, whether it be more coastal with LA and Orange County or the Inland Empire with Riverside and San Bernardino. Net between all of that, we saw a positive 9% gain, very similar to what we saw statewide at a positive 10%. And it was a year ago, first quarter, middle of March, when we started to see the shelter in place impacts. So it's not too far out of the question. And as I've been reminding clients that I've personally been meeting with, we're about to see come 2Q some very astronomical percentage changes. So let's all get comfortable with that. We're going to see them for the next couple of quarters. And it has a lot to do with the decreases that we went through and experienced a year ago. Here's a chart that we've been tracking and trending, whether it be brick and mortar stores here at the top green line, or the blue line, which is more of the online sales. And that's online that's allocated either by way of the fulfillment centers locally to your jurisdiction, if you have a fulfillment center, or the countywide use tax pools. And what you really see, I've had to admit to a lot of clients that before the most recent period, yes, online sales was growing, but these two lines theoretically would never cross. And I've had to most recently kind of eat those words and say, yep, okay, they're getting pretty close. I think I'm still pretty safe, given that once we hit calendar year 21, now again, with some of the results that we've seen most recently and that optimism that shoppers will go back shopping in stores again, we'll see this green line trend upward very shortly, very soon. And the interesting dynamic, and one that I'm going to be closely watching here, is how much, if anything, does online sales activity go back down? Again, as consumers kind of find what they're comfortable with and what they enjoy, how they enjoy purchasing goods. It'll be for them probably the next 5 years. I'm going to be interested in watching this trend continue. Then there's just some points of interest here, especially with the adoption and implementation of AB 147, that from 2018 going forward, this new tax revenue from out-of-state online retailers really has enhanced the amount of revenue generated from online sales activity. Let's talk really quickly from an educational piece, but then talk about the big change that's happened here in 1Q from a major retailer. Just a reminder, sales tax is generated when goods are already within the state and sold, whether that be kind of at a retail store, your local Walmart, Target, whatever. Also, fulfillment centers where goods are stored before we buy them. That's sales tax generated locally. The use tax piece is when goods come from out of state. And most of the time, those tax dollars end up into our countywide use tax pool, which every agency gets a little piece of. So us as consumers, sometimes, especially when we're buying online, we don't always know where the goods are stored to be able to then kind of go, hey, where do I want my tax dollars to go? It's very easy for us to tangibly go from one city to the next and buy something over the counter and thereby control. But internet sales, online activity really depends on where goods are at the time we buy them. So that's the reminder here for the change that has happened most recently with Amazon, just to talk about it, because some of your local agencies, or if you're in a county with an agency that is going to benefit a little bit here from Amazon's change, then it's good to know. Just keep in mind the historical structure for Amazon. They have been an out-of-state company coming up until this point. So no matter where the goods were sold, because Amazon, for tax reporting purposes, was an out-of-state company, they allocated all their tax dollars into the countywide use tax pool, and every agency got a little bit, a little share of however much the goods were shipped into the county as a whole. And it was probably the most evenly distributed way, or even the best way to evenly distribute Amazon's activity, because as we see on the roads, cars and trucks are everywhere in every jurisdiction. So everybody's kind of otherwise impacted by Amazon. The change that they made most recently is right here at the warehouse piece of it. And on the next slide, I'll give you the visual of what this looks like. But before, they didn't technically own the warehouses in California. They were owned and operated by a third party. And now they technically own those warehouses. And so this is what has now started to shift their reporting from both in-state and out-of-state, like what we saw in that previous slide. So some of the allocation is going to go to the place of sale where the goods are in-state when we buy them. Some is still going to go into the countywide use tax pool. And I know we've been communicating with a lot of our clients on this fact, so it's just to reiterate, because this was in 1Q, the first quarter where we saw this happen. To give the visual, you'll see here, right in the middle of the screen, this is the box that Amazon's previously lived in, where they owned and operate. The fulfillment centers were owned and operated by a third party. All their dollars went into the countywide use tax pool. So every agency got a little bit. Now they're actually going to be shifting. Part of it is those goods that are still coming from out of state, those tax dollars will still go into the county pool. But for goods that reside in California at the time we buy them, those dollars are going to go to a local jurisdiction where the fulfillment center is located. So again, we've really tried to walk clients through this whole dynamic and the fiscal impacts. It appears as though on a bigger scale, it doesn't look like the shift, financially speaking, the shift that we were expecting, it wasn't quite to that degree. It was a little bit less, and thereby the fiscal impacts to most agencies hasn't been as much as we were anticipating. We do tend to lean on the side of being conservative just in case, but that has been a little bit of a relief, and especially at a time where we've seen the economy continue to grow and expand and really start to recover very strongly from the pandemic period. This change has been a little bit mitigated by those factors. But it's probably not going to go away as far as the topic goes. And as we've been talking about, it's here on the local Bradley Burns, or the 1% portion of the base sales tax rate that comes to each jurisdiction. The other thing to keep in mind here is that this Amazon change will also move money around the state related to Prop 172, or the public safety aspect of the base sales tax rate, that half cent that our counties really rely heavily on. It's a little bit, usually about 5% comes back to local agencies. They get Prop 172, but that 95% piece that stays with county, it is very important for them and as part of their funding. And so to have a change of allocation really start to move that revenue stream, most counties have not lost sight of that and are sensitive to it. So this is a topic that we're going to hear probably more of coming this summer. But then also for you folks on the transportation agency side, there's the most notably, it's usually called the LTF, the local transportation funding. It's this quarter-cent portion of the base sales tax rate that comes to you it might be your transportation commission or your transportation agency. That too is likely to start to shift. More transportation money is going to land in the counties that have the fulfillment centers, and a little bit less in other jurisdictions that used to get that because it was always dumped into the county pool. So the breadth on this change, again, we don't lose sight of it. We're trying to really watch closely for all of our clients And feel free to reach out if your agency, you've got some uncertainty or some questions about it. We're happy to help and give some more information on that end. So the 21-22 sales tax consideration, it's kind of short term, this next year, and what we've seen, especially out of 1Q, the most recent data set, and knowing that the federal government has put a lot of money into our economy. Obviously, the pandemic has really enhanced the growth of online sales activity versus traditional brick and mortar. We're going to continue to watch that dynamic. It's going to be very interesting to see what consumers do with their habits. Restaurants and gas stations, as I may have mentioned earlier, it's probably the next to rebound, especially this summer. So if you're heavy on tourism, heavy on commuter traffic coming through or to your jurisdiction, it might just take a little bit more time to see those rebound. Building construction, business to business activity should remain rather steady. And again, as we'll hear about the next topic with property tax, no real decrease, very little impact. So likely to see these two industries only continue to grow as we move forward in the return of the office environments and businesses getting back to their new ways. And then auto sales, including RVs and toys, boats, motorcycles, water toys and the like, could have been a little bit of a bubble. We are very interested to see what the summer of 2021 is going to hold, because it is, for most agencies, they're very big revenue generators that if that ended up being a bit of a bubble and we see it change during the summer, it could require a little bit of tweaking on the forecasts. I think early on, I forgot to mention the second poll question that we have. So Catherine, Christine, if you want to kick that off, how impacted has your tax revenue been? So for those of you that do work for a city, how impacted have your revenues been during the pandemic? Dramatically, moderately, very little, or have you been growing? And I can tell you probably 6 months ago, I probably wouldn't have thrown in that last one there of still growing. But what we've seen out of especially the sales tax side of things, we have seen a lot of agencies just grow through this pandemic, especially those with fulfillment centers, as we talked about. So it's probably not as easy to answer this one if compared to 6 months ago. All right. So okay, yeah, very good. Kind of fits with what I was thinking, actually. With the majority being there moderately or very little, it's fascinating, right? Just to think about how we've closed the economy, we shut down, and overall revenues haven't been as impacted. Obviously, those that are dramatically impacted, probably more heavy on tourism, business travel. Especially restaurants, those that haven't yet come back. Keep your eyes open. So hopefully those will come soon. So let's jump really quickly into property tax. Here, for fiscal year 2021, the assessed values have already been implemented, or at least for fiscal year, they were already implemented when shelter in place began, and so that is, from a property tax generation standpoint, not the worst thing in the world. It is really only the supplemental assessments that could be impacted, and that's kind of if properties were changed hands and assessed values then way less. We kind of reflect back on the Great Recession of what that could have been. Fascinating as well. Median home values have only really increased across the state, with homes still selling quickly in metropolitan areas where we saw a lot of an exodus out with the pandemic. LA, San Francisco, most especially Bay Area, folks moving out into whether it be the Sacramento area, North Sacramento region, or even down here in Southern California, out into the Inland Empire. Folks were ready and willing to buy those homes when we saw then home values increase. I just touched on that point of where homeowners were going. California residential building permits remain steady. Here we have increased values, and for folks that still had some equity, or given our low interest rate environment that we've been maintaining, be able to tap into that new equity because home values have increased. now being able to do projects and put money back into their homes. So by way of building permits, we've seen those remain fairly steady, even though, we've had we always have a shortage of housing here in California. And then still expecting more dramatic growth in rural, less developed regions. And as many of you are struggling right now with legislative mandates playing a part of this last year and kind of ramping things up. Not as much data because, like I said, assessed values and what was already in place really kind of takes hold. Here you can see for calendar year 2020, the roll has been in place for January 1st, 2021. So that kind of sets us up for fiscal year 21-22. For those properties that have changed hands, we've seen increased values. So it's likely that they're going to end up with an increased assessment up to that new value. The big thing to watch for is the second bullet point. So if you're in a community, and as we saw with the first poll, we have a lot of folks who property taxes are number one generator. If you're in an older community, not as built out, not continuing to build out, that the annual inflationary factor, which is capped at 2% because of Prop 13, it ended up because of the pandemic and its impacts on inflationary factors dropping to 1.1036. So it's only about half of that 2% cap that we otherwise would have seen or expected. So really watch your property tax revenues related to this inflationary factor. So low turnover neighborhoods or cities, built out a lot of long-term ownership there. Be mindful to watch here, and the great folks at HDL Core & Cone most certainly can help with the dynamic and the demographics of your community to really be mindful for your property tax revenue forecasts. Then also commercial properties, where this is probably the one uncertain area, right? Is how much more will the new remote work environment impact commercial properties, industrial properties? Will they start to change hands? Will values in some jurisdictions start to decrease? So if your jurisdiction's heavy on commercial properties, be listening for what the rates have been and the interest in businesses coming back into the work environment. Just be very cognizant of it. And one of the things I'll reiterate at the very end, but most certainly between sales tax and property tax, think here of what's the basis of your those revenue streams for your communities. Really kind of get into the details and make sure that you're aware what's going to move the needle the most. On the sales tax side, which businesses are your top generators? On your property tax side, again, what's the demographic of your community to really be sensitive to these trends and how they're going to impact going forward. I think right now we've got another poll question. It just keep you awake, keep you engaged. Has your agency been exploring new revenue opportunities? So as we saw with the last poll question, we had quite a few agencies that were dramatically impacted. Sales tax and property tax are some of the easiest, most notable ways to put a ballot measure together and raise some additional revenue. Also, the next two revenue streams that we're going to be talking about, TOT and business license, are a little sometimes less sexy, but they're smaller in overall generation nature. So, but they do get quite a bit of notice. So, just what's the vibe, if you will, around the idea or the need for new revenues? And I'll kind of throw in some talking point here as this comes up. We have seen over the last two big national election cycles, so 2018 and 2020, so a lot of agencies put a lot of ballot measures together with a relatively high level of success, whether it be sales tax, property tax, especially on the TOT side, sometimes an easier sell. Here you can see about 2/3, give or take, of agencies are looking for new revenue opportunities, needing to kind of shore up. There's only two sides of the ledgers, as as most of us remember and have to communicate out, it's revenues versus expenditures. So one goes up or the other comes down. It's the only way to get it done and balanced out. So good to see that 2/3 are considering it, looking to put it before your council. Again, if you need help on that front, I'll just kind of say it here, reach out to a consultant, us included, if you need extra help with any new opportunities. So let's go through, here we go. Starting in TOT, short-term rentals, what happened when shelter in place took, as you can see, minimal to zero foreign travel, business travelers, social distancing requirement, minimal vacation travel last summer. So obviously the industry overall was greatly impacted. Hotels that have not been able to stay open, we've seen local governments start to buy those hotels in order to facilitate some homeless housing or some homeless services, which is very interesting. Quite the dynamic, and no doubt within our community is going to raise a lot of different opinions about how that should take place, but we have started to see that happen. Just to give the visual of the impacts. So 2018, what we saw with regards to TOT, statewide average for all of our clients, just under $4 million. 2019, right before the pandemic, up above. And then in 2020, as expected, about a 50% or so drop out of TOT and short-term rentals. And the funny thing here, TOT, mostly being hotels, didn't get a lot of activity during the pandemic, but we have seen short-term rentals continue to increase. And I think it's on the multiple fronts there. Folks that were using or have properties as a second investment, more willing to rent them out. And we saw folks looking to get out of the metropolitan areas into vacationing opportunities because they were all working remotely. So we actually have seen the better part of this sustained by short-term rental activity. Still all coming into the same coffer, but it's quite the dynamic that we have now with both these opportunities. And then where and how the impacts, you can see here, just December 2019 versus December 2020, just to give the visual, Bay Area versus coastal, most impacted, as you see kind of the rent decrease, about 3/4 of a decrease there. NorCal versus SoCal. Still under, still almost a 50% impact for Northern California, a little less for Southern California, given the dynamics overall that where the kind of LA, Orange County with Inland Empire being a little bit more diverse, NorCal heavy on the Bay Area, and especially for foreign and business travel. And then vacation spots, even those decreased, most notably in December. It's probably, as you'll hear me talk about the what's to come and the considerations, it's probably the area that expands and drives up the most. But statewide, we saw rents decrease by about 54% from December to December. So TOT, short-term rental considerations, with the greater distribution of vaccines, as we've all likely seen and started to experience, seeing more summer travel on the horizon. We're living in this period right now. So no doubt that's going to start to help both TOT and short-term rentals. Also, the second bullet point, very interesting to note. And if you talk to your hotels pretty frequently, try to keep track of the per night hotel rates and watch those increase. As a soon-to-be business traveler, again, I'm starting to watch for what the nightly rates are, and they've probably increased 25 to 50% over the pre-pandemic level. So that's going to help play into the overall amount of TOT generated. But really interesting there. And also on the short-term rentals, we've seen nightly stays for a house and otherwise really eclipse the $400 to $500 a night rate. Short-term rentals are even more popular now, just given the uncomfortability with staying in a hotel and the convenience of staying in more of a structured house. So what we do anticipate, and we've already seen it, Disneyland reopening, to different degrees, but expect to see more of that through the fall, and especially convention centers. In-person conventions are a thing again. I think the first one here in California that I've taken note of is in September with the League of California Cities. And I know that CSMFO is talking about their upcoming convention in San Diego 2022, just as a cheap plug for CSMFO. It just gives hope and optimism, I think, for both TOT and short-term rentals as we move through this next fiscal year. Then business license, kind of that small little extra piece. Locally, during the pandemic, we saw cities defer the business license amount. So most certainly collections in 2020. Most time it's based on calendar year activity. So collections have been less than 2019. And also businesses have closed, but within the highly desirable regions, areas, neighborhoods of our communities, we've seen new businesses start to come in, including restaurants. This was kind of fascinating. I had a lot of clients ask me, hey, we think restaurants are going to start to really drop off here. For those areas where there's still a lot of foot traffic, or maybe tenant improvements don't need to be as high to really jump in there, we've seen some new restaurants come in and really fill up the coming summer, or kind of this summer, the period that we're in, the pent-up demand for dining indoors again. So for fiscal year 21-22, and the considerations, this most short-term trend, depending on your rate structure, so keep that in mind as well. If business license tends to be a little bit of a higher generator, if you're thinking about the rate structure and how it's built there. But business license revenue could lag a little bit in 21-22 because if it's based on 2021 gross activity, right, which no doubt will be a little bit less than it previously is. If your license is capped at a max rate, overall revenues here also may take a little bit of time. Those bigger companies who pay a flat rate or kind of max out, they may be expanding really quickly, but business license revenue won't be reflective of that. It really kind of is more, if your business license is capped, you're probably more looking at the mid-range to lower businesses and your total number of counts there. From summer and beyond, demand should help balance the revenues, new versus closed, that dynamic, as I just mentioned. If we think about brick and mortar stores from a sales tax perspective, folks, again, being out and about within a strip center or a mall type location, some of your smaller stores and availability of space, they may see that foot traffic come back and be willing to open up a new location. So again, still kind of hope and optimism of what's to come. And if your license is based on gross receipts, it may return a little faster than more of an employee-based rate structure. So, again, kind of thinking here about how your rate is structured. If we maintain in a remote work environment, or businesses really do permanently transition to that, the employee-based rate structure may not be a good one to use. You'll have less traffic, and thereby you'll see fundamentally your revenues decrease or stay lower. So something to consider overall how it's structured. Here, last slide, efficient monitoring, but it's also our last poll question that I want to run out here before I dig into the rest of this. Does your agency use topic-specific consultants to monitor different revenue streams? Again, it's one side of the overall picture, but you'll hear me kind of talk about why we've got this poll question coming up, just to see if you're getting all of the information that you feel is adequate to be able to manage your revenue streams. So just a simple yes, no here at the very end. Let's see how the results come out. And hopefully the presentation overall has really started to just trigger and think about your revenue streams and some of those underlying features. We just need a couple more seconds on to see what the results are. Perfect. Wonderful. Good to see. Yeah, about half of you guys are using topic-specific consultants to help. So when we talk about efficient monitoring of your revenue streams, just a few bullet points here of things to keep in mind. Understand your agency's demographic, really what makes up the revenue, but even the underlying conditions therein, the base of the businesses, the type of the housing, the rate structure. Knowledge is power, and most certainly for those of 2/3 of you that are looking to put out possibly a ballot measure or look to try to find different ways to increase some of these revenue streams, make sure you're very knowledgeable about how, and it will help you in the communication with your community to explain why you might need to switch from an employee-based business license tax to a gross receipt business license tax or something therein. So understand your agency's demographic and the structure. Number 2, find news sources that provide concise updates regarding the demographic. Here, I really do try to stress for a lot of clients and folks who ask me all the time, hey, what news source do you look at? Where are you looking to get information? I don't read it all. I can't. We most certainly, here on the team that I help lead, we've got about 12 highly trained professional individuals who also dig into very specific pieces of the economy and into the news cycles so that we can keep multiple eyes on it. But I would offer up, find, as soon as you know the first bullet point, what moves your needle for your local revenues, find a news source that really taps into that thing specifically. If it's property taxes, maybe it's listening to and talking with a lot of your local realtors. Get involved with some of their newsletters and some of the things that they're putting out. Obviously, for sales tax, use a consultant, but maybe know. Okay, if you're heavy on autos, then really watch the auto news and try to limit, because again, you can't read it all. You can't be the knowledge base of everything. So focus your attention. You might have more success there. Community outreach. Go ask how they're doing. It's kind of my quote here. Go out and talk to your businesses. Funny enough is, and we see this with our council members all the time, right? They're out talking with businesses and they're very knowledgeable about what's going on. But the very interesting thing when you go out and talk to businesses is if they are booming, if they're doing really well, they want to tell you. If they're doing really bad, they want to tell you. Businesses and business owners, most certainly, once they find out you're from the city, they're probably more than willing to give you some information. So if it's a large property owner that generates a good portion of your property tax, hey, get out there and talk with them. If it's the sales tax piece and they're one of your top generators overall, go out there and just touch base with the business owner and see how things are going. It'll allow you to stay on top of the trends quicker than the news cycles even. And then most certainly with sometimes the consultants, because we're not at the ground level with you to have those conversations. And then the fourth bullet point here, I don't want to make a cheap pitch for our company, HDL, but hire a revenue or tax topic-specific consultant. Don't try to do it alone. There are a lot of us within the industry who are here to help you and provide you as much information and data that we have available. And I think leaning into consultants is actually a good thing and more efficient use of your time. And given constrained employees and kind of our efforts, sometimes it can be to your benefit to just kind of listen up and be able to take information that you're given and pass it along in a very efficient way. So hopefully all of that helps you. It's the end of my presentation. So thank you all again for listening, and hopefully it gives you some good things to be able to use here in the short run.
Thank you, Bobby. That was excellent. I enjoyed your presentation very much. We only have a couple of minutes, so I will not be able to go through all the questions. Most of you asked the questions anonymously. If you want us to get back to you, you can email us or put it on the chat to the panelists of your question again, and we will definitely pass that on to Bobby. So Bobby, there are a few questions in regards to the fulfillment center. So the first one is, does the last mile facility consider fulfillment center? And then the second one is about the size. Is there a size requirement that determines if the sales tax goes to the local jurisdiction versus the pool?
Yeah, those are great questions. So specifically on Amazon's efforts for this last mile facility, and for many of us, we can tangibly think of it as anything that is close to our house. They want to be able to do same day deliveries. Well, a lot of those goods, when we kind of know that that's the fact, a lot of the goods aren't stored in that local last mile facility, or it won't be our estimation that they'll be stored there. So they'll be coming from a larger facility, either in state or out of state. Once the goods are purchased, they're going to land in that last mile facility. That's the piece where it's not likely to be a true fulfillment center generating revenue for your local jurisdiction. So be very wary when you hear last mile facility related to equaling, or in this case, not really equaling revenue generation for you. And then, is there a specific size requirement? Think very, very large, 1 million, 2 million plus square feet facilities that are very close to airports. That's where we've seen a lot of especially Amazon fulfillment centers, but it's everybody. All of their fulfillment centers are really regionally congregated around airports, where they can bring goods in and drop them off and get them onto trucks as quickly as possible. So size requirement is a big thing. Think 1 million, 2 million plus. If you're in the 30 to 50,000 square feet and it's that last mile, probably not going to relate to too much sales tax.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Bobby, for your time today. And so we have to end this session because we have the next one starting in 5 minutes. So thank you again, and we will pass along the rest of the questions to you. All right. Thank you, everybody. I'll see you at 11 o'clock. Bye.